Welcome, strategists and innovators. Today we are exploring a transformative analytical pattern, the devil's advocate technique. We're going to learn how to actively prompt Claude to attack your business plans, find critical flaws, and stress test your arguments before they hit the real world. Let's get started. Let's begin by defining the devil's advocate technique. In standard interactions, we often use AI to validate our thinking or expand on our ideas. However, the devil's advocate technique flips this dynamic entirely. Here, you explicitly command Claude to attack your premise. Why do we do this? Because as professionals, we are highly susceptible to confirmation bias. We fall in love with our own business plans and subconsciously ignore glaring risks. By instructing Claude to systematically dismantle our arguments, we introduce a brilliant, objective counterforce that has no ego and no fear of office politics. To execute this, you simply present your plan and explicitly ask Claude what critics would say and what contradictory evidence exists. Looking at this flowchart, we can see the divergence in outcomes based on your prompt strategy. When you feed your business plan into Claude using a standard prompt, you often travel the top path, creating an echo chamber that merely validates your idea. But when we apply the devil's advocate prompt, we force the AI down the bottom path. Here, it acts as a critical filter, identifying blind spots and risks. This adversarial filtering is what ultimately leads us to the final green node, a bulletproof strategy. Knowing that we need a critique is only the first step. Crafting the prompt to get a high-quality critique is the real art. If you just say, "Find flaws in my plan," Claude will give you a generic, polite list. To get enterprise-grade feedback, you must use role-playing to assign a highly critical persona. You need to tell Claude to act as a ruthless chief financial officer or act as a skeptical venture capitalist. Why does this work? Because assigning a role mathematically shifts Claude's internal probability weights. It abandons its default, helpful assistant tone and adopts the rigorous, risk-averse analytical framework of a financial executive. By explicitly giving Claude permission to be ruthless, you temporarily bypass its natural tendency to be polite and agreeable, unlocking raw, unvarnished strategic feedback. This diagram breaks down the architecture of the perfect adversarial prompt. It rests on three pillars. First, we assign a persona, like a skeptical CFO. Second, we provide the context, which is the actual meat of your proposal, like a Q3 marketing plan. Third, and most importantly, we set constraints, such as commanding it to find exactly 5 fatal flaws. When these three elements converge, the resulting output is a highly targeted expert critique, far superior to a basic conversational response. Let's level up our strategy with an advanced cognitive framework called the reverse research method. Normally, we gather data and hope it leads to a conclusion. Here, we start with the conclusion and work backward. You state your boldest claim to Claude, for example, that your new software will boost team productivity by 50%. Then, you ask Claude, what specific, undeniable evidence would I need to actually prove this claim to a skeptical buyer? Why is this so powerful? Because it completely neutralizes your own confirmation bias. You are no longer cherry-picking data to make yourself feel good. Claude is giving you an objective, ruthless checklist of the exact metrics, case studies, and counter-evidence required to validate your claim. If your current business plan cannot satisfy Claude's checklist, you know your plan isn't ready for the market. Follow the sequence in this diagram. It starts with the user stating their bold conclusion to Claude. Claude doesn't validate the conclusion. Instead, it returns 2 critical artifacts, the exact required evidence needed to prove the claim, and the likely counter-evidence critics will use against you. The user then takes this objective checklist and uses it to audit their strategy. The final result is a reality-tested plan that relies on empirical data rather than blind optimism. Our next advanced strategy is the recursive critique. When professionals ask Claude for feedback, they usually stop after the first answer. That is a mistake. The first layer of critique usually only uncovers obvious, surface-level operational problems. To find the real danger, we use recursive prompting to make Claude interrogate its own answers. After Claude identifies a flaw in your plan, you immediately follow up. What is the hidden assumption behind the flaw you just identified? And after it answers that, you push deeper, based on those assumptions. What is the foundational risk we are completely blind to? This simulates a multi-hour executive strategy session in minutes. It forces the AI to peel back the layers of your business logic to find the problem behind the problem. Just remember, you must validate these deep insights, as AI reasoning can occasionally become circular if pushed too far without human grounding. This state diagram models the recursive plunge. We enter at level 1, extracting the surface flaw. But we don't exit, we push the state forward by asking what drives the flaw, moving into level 2, hidden assumptions. We push once more, asking for the core blind spot, arriving at level 3, the foundational risk. The note highlights that this is where the true danger lies. Finally, before exiting the loop, the insights must pass through a human validation node to ensure the logic remains sound. Finding flaws in your business plan is painful, but a critique is entirely useless if you don't act on it. This brings us to the refinement loop. The magic of Claude is that it isn't just an incredible critic, it is an exceptional problem solver. Once Claude has played devil's advocate and torn your plan apart, you must close the loop. You do this by meta-prompting, Claude, you just identified 3 major vulnerabilities in my launch strategy. Now, I want you to revise my original plan to actively mitigate these 3 specific risks, while ensuring our budget stays under our original constraints. This is the epitome of human-AI collaboration. You provide the creative vision. Claude acts as the stress tester to break it. Then, you command Claude to rebuild the architecture so it is stronger, patching the exact holes it just discovered. Here we see the continuous refinement loop. Your draft business plan drops into Claude's devil's advocate critique, which outputs identified vulnerabilities. Instead of stopping there, we issue a rebuild and mitigate prompt. Claude generates targeted solutions, which flow into a human review gate. If it still needs work, we feed it back into the top for another round of critique. If approved, we exit the loop with a highly optimized final plan that has survived rigorous adversarial testing. Let's ground this theory in a real-time, highly practical use case, stress testing a product launch. Imagine you are launching a new B2B project management software. You've spent weeks on the go-to-market strategy. A novice would just execute it. But you are a professional. You feed your 5-page launch document into Claude and deploy the framework. You prompt, act as a cynical, well-funded competitor. Read my launch plan and tell me exactly how you would steal my momentum and exploit weaknesses in my pricing model. Claude analyzes the data and delivers a brutal truth: your freemium tier gives away too much value. Claude predicts competitors will run ads telling users how to bypass your premium features, starving your revenue. Armed with this foresight, you don't panic. You immediately use the refinement loop, prompting Claude to restructure your pricing tiers to force enterprise conversion earlier, saving your startup from a fatal launch error. This sequence maps the timeline of our product launch use case. The CEO submits their strategy to Claude, who is running the cynical competitor persona. Claude returns the exploit, identifying the overly generous freemium tier. The CEO quickly countermaneuvers, prompting Claude to restructure the tiers. Claude returns a new, dated pricing model. Finally, the CEO takes this hardened, bulletproof strategy and deploys it successfully into the live market. We must address the elephant in the room: psychological friction. It is incredibly uncomfortable to watch a business plan you spent weeks drafting get dismantled in seconds, even if the critic is an AI. It is a natural human reaction to get defensive and try to justify why the AI is wrong. But if you ignore the critique to protect your ego, you forfeit the entire value of the devil's advocate technique. How do we overcome this? You must actively frame the interaction as a red teaming exercise, a military concept where a group is hired specifically to attack your defenses. You have to remind yourself of one undeniable truth: it is infinitely better to fail in a private, secure Claude chat window than to fail in the public market where it costs you real capital and reputation. Treat Claude's adversarial feedback not as a personal insult, but as a risk probability indicator, helping you build essential contingency plans. This diagram highlights the cognitive shifts required for ego detachment. We must branch out into 3 mindsets. First, acknowledge the discomfort, accepting that AI feedback is purely analytical, not personal. Second, embrace red teaming, actively wanting to find your flaws before your competitors do. Third, focus on outcomes, internalizing the core philosophy that it is vastly better to fail safely in a chat interface than to suffer a catastrophic failure in the real market. To conclude our training, we must establish the critical guardrail of the human-AI balance. The devil's advocate technique is breathtakingly powerful, but Claude is not an infallible oracle. It is a pattern recognition engine. It completely lacks real-world, boots-on-the-ground business intuition. It might point out a theoretical flaw that your specific human network or industry reputation renders irrelevant. This is why you must implement the 80-20 rule. Let Claude do 80% of the heavy lifting, finding the blind spots, generating the counterarguments, and running the recursive critiques. But you must reserve the final 20% strictly for human executive judgment. You make the final call. Validate critical vulnerabilities with real human experts. Mastering this balance ensures you build resilient, innovative strategies without surrendering your leadership to an algorithm. To master these advanced AI workflows and truly elevate your career, I invite learners to like, subscribe, and visit quicktechie.com for premium certification prep, including Q&A banks, full ebooks, audiobooks, full-length training, and interview guides. Our final decision tree illustrates the ultimate flow of executive authority. Claude provides the adversarial critique, which hits a human evaluation gate. Is the flaw actually valid? If yes, backed by empirical data, we route to refined strategy. If no, because Claude missed nuanced human context, we route to human override. Both paths safely converge on the final executive decision. The AI advises, you decide.